One small step for man, one large leap for mankind. This quote played around the world for every human on Earth to hear. The greatest accomplishment of humanity brought about a great close to a decade of change. The iconic events and trends of the 1960s would greatly affect life, and the major change it caused would forever be seen. However, the great change caused in this period of time is one that can only be explained from the beginning.
Solemnly swear to faithfully execute the office of President of the United States of America. To faithfully execute the office of the President of the United States of America. And to the best of your ability, and to the best of my ability. Serve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. Serve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. So help me God. So help me God.
With the election of a new president, a new era of ideas will come with him. John Fitzgerald Kennedy will come to shape the early 60s and future American policy. Kennedy's major push for civil rights will help end segregation and widespread racism in the United States. However, the president isn't the only thing that's changing in the 1960s. After Nazi Germany was defeated in World War II, two major world powers rose to the top. The United States and the Soviet Union had opposing ideologies, and they wanted to have more control over the world. Both nations spread their ideals and made alliances in foreign lands. In Vietnam, a Soviet-backed communist uprising took the north. To stop the spread of communism, the U.S. sent aid to the south. This conflict will begin to escalate into a much larger, deadlier conflict. U.S. foreign policy today is very similar. The United States has sent troops to many Middle Eastern and African countries to get the most favorable outcome for the United States. The policy of intervention has been prevalent since the 1960s.
(1962) started with the official creation of the U.S. Navy SEALs that became a very big part in the U.S. military. 7 months later, the very much beloved Marilyn Monroe died on August 5th in Brentwood, Los Angeles, California, after overdosing on sleeping pills in her own house. After the police conducted an investigation, they came to the conclusion that it was probable suicide due to the fact of her depression. Many say her tragic childhood and emotional vulnerability was what made her so beloved, and was the reason of her impact on most people after her death. Not that much time passed before the Cuban Missile Crisis occurred on October 16th and lasted 13 days, ending on October 28th. Only one death occurred, being the own pilot named Rudolph Anderson Jr. No one else's life was taken. Soon after, the To Kill a Mockingbird movie was released on December 25th, 2 years after the release of the book. The book was very big for civil rights, but not popular with many white people at the time, due to the time of racism.
1962 wasn't the only time of chaos, though. On June 5th, 1963, the Soviet ship Luna reaches Earth's orbit, but fails to reach the moon. This attempt was one of the many attempts to reach the moon, but despite the Soviets' tries, the USA finally took home the win on 1969. On November 22nd, 1963, one of the worst events of the 60s took place. John Fitzgerald Kennedy was shot in the head when he was on the way to the Dallas Trade Center. This event will always be remembered in the hearts of many Americans. John currently has many memorials, from the name of high schools to an entire plaza.
I have a dream that my 4 little kids will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
1964 was a year full of civil rights. Most notably, the Civil Rights Act was signed into existence. This was a very crucial time for civil rights, as the Civil Rights Act was the first serious attempt to secure equal rights. However, this act was openly opposed in the Senate, and an 83-day filibuster was put into action before signing the Civil Rights Act. The Nobel Peace Prize was also given to Martin Luther King for his speeches against segregation, because he was also a very important piece in the puzzle of civil rights.
In the year 1965, the Vietnam War starts to kick into action. On November 8th, the U.S. sends its first Marines to arrive in South Vietnam. Following this, on November 14 through 18, the U.S. fights its first large-scale Vietnamese battle in La Drang Valley. However, this was not the only impact America had on the war. On February 7th, 1965, President Johnson approved of the bombing of Vietnam, dubbed Operation Flaming Dart. These events were meant to demonstrate the United States' power to warn off Vietnam. On September 8th, 1966, the first episode of Star Trek was made. Star Trek was a very popular show that soon had movies made of it too. This show is about space science fiction and became one of the most popular entertainment brands in history. It was made by Gene Roddenberry and made the science fiction audience much larger, bringing opportunity to other sci-fi shows and movies. Star Trek movies are still being made to this day. The year 1967 was a year of sports. The ABA is the organization that led to the creation of the NBA. Not only that, but the first Super Bowl was hosted in Los Angeles and was won by the Green Bay Packers, who beat the Kansas City Thieves 35-10. These sports soon gained popularity, and now they have opened up many jobs in the U.S. and made the U.S. the central of sports such as American football and basketball. Still to this day, those sport organizations are still popular.
1968 was a very sad year due to the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on April 4th, 1968 by James Earl Ray. As most of you would know, MLK was a very big civil rights leader and caused change with nonviolent protests. Adding on to this, on June 6th, Robert Francis Kennedy died just 4.5 years later after his brother, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Robert was an American politician and lawyer who served as a United States Senator from 1965 until his assassination in Los Angeles, California.
Nearing the end of the year, Earthrise was taken from Apollo 8 by William Anders on December 24, 1968. Apollo 8, the second manned spaceflight mission in the United States space program, was launched on December 21, 1968, and became the first manned spacecraft to leave Earth's orbit and orbit the moon while safely returning back to Earth.
In the year of 1969, we launched a spacecraft called the Apollo 11. This spacecraft was the first to break through the Earth's atmosphere and reach the moon. As the Apollo 11 arrived at its destination, Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon, and that is where the famous phrase, "Once one step for man, a giant leap for mankind," came into play. This is proof of how technology has evolved in 6 years. After that, we started launching more rockets into space. To this day, NASA is making a new rocket to send people to Mars. The launch of the Apollo 11 was just 49 years ago. Nowadays, space technology is so advanced that someday we will be able to go to different galaxies.
As you can see, all of the 1960s contributed to a change and built up what America is today.